What's up? I'm back. I would rather rot than actually be professional. I say chewing on a piece of wood that has cracks all over it now. Yes, I still have this one stick from that mango pop. Um, yeah, I'd rather die than be professional. So let me just put this aside. While I am currently, someone's in prison apparently. Some streamer, whatever. Notifications, feeds, you know how it goes. While I am currently in the dark, I wanted to take a quick break from planning my next story. Because I've lost control of my life and can only find joy and meaning through making more and more story ideas. Isn't that fun? So while I'm currently making like a storyboard or whatever you want to call it, like a skeleton map to follow out for a story for once in my life, I have decided to just start recording. Since I didn't know what to do, I am flip-flopping in my head right now, and I'm going to quickly roll a d6. So because D3s don't exist, and I'm going to either do TTRPG stuff, uh, weapons, or magic in fantasy. So in order, TTRPG, weapons, or magic in fantasy. And weapons. Okay, let's see how long I'll actually stay on this topic. Um, so I guess we're going to be rambling about weaponry and stories because, I mean, hey, I'm a big fan. So this is also unorganized like last time because I don't know, going through something, I guess. Fuck you. What day is it? It's okay, so in 2 days, or one day really, I'll have a session, or maybe, I don't know, players. We'll see. So, weaponry and stories. Now, yet again, I want you to stretch, go drink water, stuff like that, you know, how I always say, drink water, take care of yourself, things of that nature. Now, what's important here is this can really fit for just about any sort of genre, so I'll try to cover my bases as much as I can, but I don't know, given that I'm not making notes for this one, it'll probably be a bit tricky to, stay on topic, cover all the points I want to cover, not repeat myself, things like that, but I will do my best regardless as I grab a bottle of water because I just remembered I had finished the one I had opened earlier. Sorry, I was moving all around, which is why I sound exasperated, just clambering back onto my bed. There we go. Now, checks phone for notifications, nothing, good. Now, for all of you freaks, image, yes. For all of you freaks, um, what's a good place to start when you're talking about the weaponry you'll have in your stories? Well, it's very important. Hold on. There we are. It's very important for your genre, time period, and tech level to get those in front of you very quickly so then you can start going through and realizing what works and why as I take yet another sip of water. So, consider the following. You're making fantasy story and you're making a sci-fi story. Two separate stories, I want to clarify that right now, and you're considering what to put in each of them. Now, it should be very obvious, no, the energy weapons and kinetic weapons, because again, on this channel we're kinetic weapons fans, we're no energy weapons fans here. As said by, I think, the second person to ever comment on any of my videos, kinetic chads stay winning, las cells cope and seethe. He fixed my line for me because I had distracted myself midway through saying that the first time. Kinetic weapons are objectively superior to energy weapons in just about every single way. I don't care what sci-fi bullshit you throw at me, it's not happening IRL. Also, they're lame. She's not a gun if she's not breaking your wrist, elbow, and shoulder all in that first trigger pull. Now that's a weapon, that's a gun. It ain't the same otherwise. Anyway, but it should be pretty obvious like what you're focusing on in the, future settings, sci-fi settings is going to be a lot more ranged weapon based than medieval fantasy, although I don't believe that fantasy. Okay, I'll get into that in a bit, I guess. But it should, there is a stark divide, and then you go back to the fantasy, and you're having more magical elements as well as your typical sort of medieval Eurocentric ideas on weaponry, i.e., swords, cudgels, blunts, crossbows, and bows, things like that. But where does it matter for time period? Because cheese underscore stick one, all you've said so far are the genres. Well, this really only matters on anything that is not sci-fi, because in the sci-fi you can justify just about anything, including why you're using melee weapons in the future. I think it's dumb, but I mean, hey, it's not for me. I understand that. So, take a sip of water. So I'm not the guy that'll be like commenting like, "Oh, it's so stupid that you're not using X weapon," and as I fillet the military-industrial complex for 17 chapters in your comments or reviews or your thread or whatever, because I am not that lame. I'm lame. I'm not that lame. Um, but is again, I reiterate, sci-fi. You can really do whatever you want. But for fantasy, fantasy or historically speaking, you're a bit more limited in what you're able to do, just based on A, common sense, B, what it fits with your story thematically, and C, how what your story's capacity to produce. They're not gonna make a Kalashnikov pattern rifle in whatever fantasy story because they just do not have the tech understanding, presumably, or absolutely do not have the production capabilities to make that. Milled steel and all that, or whatever the fuck. I don't know. But in the future, you're more likely to see an AK clone as opposed to the past. That is not to say fantasy is completely exempt from guns. It is just not the guns you might be thinking of. So your brain might have immediately went to black powder weaponry, like the Lamat revolver, or the Colt Dragoon, or even farther back to your typical breech loaders, or even farther back to your muzzle loaders. I mean, yeah, sure, you can go for those, of course. They're all fun, cap and powder weapons, cap and ball weapons that are very, they have a commanding presence, don't they? There's just something about the slow, methodical, I have to take a while to shoot, so my chamber and maybe a second chamber I have for my emergency is really my only bullet, so I have to carefully consider my options and only use it when I think is necessary. Brings a lot to your story that you can really play upon, emphasize, utilize to its best abilities. But that's not what I'm talking about in this situation. Also, for cap and ball weaponry, people harp on chain firing a lot more of an issue than it really is. Your biggest issues would probably be, fail like poor primers, the caps not popping the way they should, or your gun just overheating, or something being misaligned and not firing as a whole, as compared to actually like chain firing. Of course, it is a problem that existed. It's just vastly overstated how much it happened. Not that I'm against it. It can make for a fun scene in a story, and every story should have two scenes like that. But it gets brought up in popular culture a bit too much. Other mechanical failures are more interesting to add in, and you should add these weapons failing because they were liable to fail, not prone to failure, of course. They wouldn't be prone to failure and still be used in the capacity they were, but they still, they were liable to have issues and fail, but they were reliable. I want to emphasize that right now. They were actually reliable, usable, functional, well-rounded weapons. Um, but I'm not talking about the black powder weapons. I'm not even talking about muzzle loaders in the conventional sense, i.e., muskets or Springfield rifles, things like that. Um, no, instead I am talking about for fantasy, because I do believe this fits for fantasy, although it should be, stated that, a few different things depending on your world, etc., etc. You are the author, you can bend the plot as is, and then you can emphasize these points or justify them as you will. But I'm talking about the pike and shot setting. Um, Now, pike and shot emphasizes a kind of time period. An aquabus, a hand cannon, the most primitive form of gun, firearm. Let me look up what kind of weapon an aquabus is. I don't even know how to pronounce this fucking thing. An arquebus. Arquebus. Arquebus? Hmm. Arquebus. Um, Or was this too late and I'm considering an earlier? Nope, yeah, Arcabis. How the fuck you pronounce this freak? Um, Wait, there's a how to pronounce right here. Nope, I'm wrong. That's go to images. Yeah, in Arcabis. Um, those and the it's not Matchlock. It's definitely not Matchlock because Matchlock came way after. What I'm thinking of is basically a chamber on the end of a pole as well. It's literally like a cannon chamber on the end of a pole. Those existed as well. It's no, it is a Matchlock. Is it? I thought Matchlock was no. That's a loading block. Matchlock Archibus. Um, the point is, I'm talking about an arquebus. How the fuck are you gonna pronounce this thing? 15th century firearm. And also, like I said earlier, the practically just a cannon's chamber on the end of a long pole that you flip your match onto and let it go. Take a sip of water. I fully believe these have a place in fantasy, like wholeheartedly. Alongside, of course, your crossbows and bows, and of course your magic. The thing is making it fit. Where do they come into play? More likely in terms of a city with that a prosperous city at that could start to add these to their repertoire. And I mentioned last time in the fantasy videos I've done so far, where it's pretty often in a lot of settings where dwarves are the ones to invent gunpowder and be forward thinking in terms of like battlefield tactics and sciences and architecture, things like that. So you could also have it be like dwarves are doing pike and shot, and it does fit with the whole like general idea of a dwarf being fortify, 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 defend, defend, defend. Dwarf Fortress reference here, a game I've never played. Um, like imagine pike walls with arquebuses mixed in, right? Or like cannon artillery, take and hold style tactics. That could very well fit a dwarven society that more is more than likely very forward thinking, and then you can throw that into your story either as the aggressor for the plot, because it's very not often you see dwarves as the aggressors in stories because dwarven ideas in pop culture, we just love dwarves that much. Shout out to dwarves, big fan of dwarves, dwarf boys. Um, Rock and stone, you know how it goes. But I think in most, like even in most traditional fantasy stories, firearms do have their place. Again, to reiterate, they might not even be better than crossbows. They're just way more simple to use, and that is their benefit. Keep in mind, black powder is costly to produce. These need to be shaped by smiths. They need to be taught by folks to use them, and you can't make back the gunpowder that you're using to teach them. You need to prop them up ahead of time with stands and fire in bursts, which makes them ill-suited for sustained fire. But you don't need them to. War wagons are a thing that have existed for a while, which that will fall into weaponry. I will talk about things beyond just guns and swords. I will mention practically like just fighting tactics, traps, vehicles, combined arms tactics. Now, I'm no armchair general, because I barely know about this shit myself. But I know what I read about. I know what I personally try to write. I do know a bit about firearms, right? Because I'm autistic, and I think thinking about these things is good fun. I'm interested in playing war games. I just don't have my boys in nearby enough to actually go ahead and do that, and I need a proper job first to, fund my hobbies. But keep in mind, I've not a whatever. That's not. I have no military like experience, right? Hell, I've never even held a gun because I don't go outside of my house. Though pretty soon, I'm actually thinking about maybe getting some friends together, getting some spending money, and I don't know, going to a range. That'd be a fun night for us, I think. Um, but not the point. I don't know how much else I can say on this specific topic, but I will try to explain like my thoughts. So first of all, this is a great thing to have in your fantasy story, especially if you're going to go about with themes such as tradition and progressive mindset, ugh, or advancing or what have you. or nature versus man, which are two themes that bring up a lot in fantasy, especially that latter part. Everyone knows the whole Fae are weak to iron, but people don't really understand why that comes from very often. The idea is they're weak to iron because iron represents humanity being grounded, advancing slowly our hold over nature and our grasp over it, our dominion over nature, and Fae being something that is supposedly very in line with nature, though you have no fucking right to be both an animal and a person when it suits you. Kill every single Fae in existence. Um, Given their stories, they fucking deserve it. Uh, and I hate gnomes. So, because of things like that, the idea like a bow probably would not be as effective against a fairy because hey, that's pretty naturally made. Sorry, carve your bow of birch, string it with waxed cordage, and fire an arrow with a napped stone head. All very natural. Shoot the bitch with a flintlock. What part of that exists in nature outside of the wooden handles? You'd have to work the iron. You'd have to mix together the chemicals to make your gunpowder. Sulfur alone doesn't do the shit gunpowder does. You'd have to form lead into these leaden balls and then fire it at great speeds. You have taken aspects of nature and twisted them to your will and shot that fucker in the head. So if you want that whole like nature and humanoid advancing mindset, guns are a phenomenal fit into your story, even if you still have magic. And then you can then consider whether or not magic would be either a neutral ground, more natural leaning, or more advanced leaning, and then go about it from there. But guns in fantasy absolutely do have their place and good reasons to exist within your story, so long as you just consider them for a bit longer than just, haha, flintlock. No, they have like meaning to them in stories. Everything has a meaning in a story. And guns absolutely have been held back as this idea of like pointless to throw in your fantasy when you have crossbows and things like that. I think they're a good fit. They might not be the most obvious natural fit, but they're a good fit. So please consider in stories that you're writing whether or not a gun could fit, because they very much could. Again, look into the Aquabus. I already spelled it out earlier, and I closed the tab. I don't want to relook into it. Look up matchlock, and you should find it. That is one word. I emphasize one word: matchlock. Uh, but so, and then where do your weapons fit in this pike and shot era? Well, first of all, a good suit of plate mail is actually bullet resistant. So you still could have your heavy tankers, right? Your heavy units being men and women of large builds in heavy suits of armor wielding large swords, because that is a badass image, and have it still fit within your story even with this tech level of firearms, because those are still, bullet resistant. They were made to be bulletproof. But bulletproof doesn't mean concussive force, things like that. Look into how body armor actually works and how it's it'll break your ribs, it'll save your life idea. Um, what was I on about? What was I? Right. Um, so there is still point for melee when guns exist, because again, slow loading time. That's like a fire. It's volley fire. So between that, it gives you a chance to advance and charge and break the line. Right? Your Flamberges or your Zweihanders leading the way to break the pike line, let the foot soldiers come in and deal with the rest. Now, so we've established, heavy troops exist and still have their place. They're costly, they're likely sell swords, but it functions, it works, and they can do their jobs right. Either wielding large axes, swords, pole arms, and probably not like a long blunt weapon like a chamber mace, right? That I don't see that so often, although I think they're very cool. Is it chamber mace? Is that what they're called? Or is it a pole mace? I don't give a shit about Minecraft. Right, trial chamber, so that's gonna fucking look like show me pole mace. Yes, pole maces existed, though. Yes, they did. Um, Morgenstern mace. Morgenstern mace. Holy fuck. Hmm. Or a Tetsubo or Kanabo, I guess, is like what I'm thinking of, but instead of the studs, it's like iron spiked bands. Or just spikes. Uh, Tetsubo, uh, or Kanabo, which are a Japanese weapon. Because I know Japanese-inspired settings exist a lot. I know what kind of man you are. But Japanese-inspired settings exist a lot. And the Tetsubo or Kanabo is a large two-handed blunt weapon. And yes, they are two-handed. Large two-handed blunt weapon. You can think of it like a baseball bat, though it's carved of one long piece of hardwood, and it is reinforced with iron studs that encompass the striking head of the weapon. It's also octagonal, I do believe, in order to emphasize striking force. And they have knurled handles, typically. Oni and demons had ones made of iron because they were that powerful, etc. It's also weapon of demons, things like that. Samurai use these quite often, from what I have been made aware of. I'm not very interested in samurai history outside of thinking they are very cool. But look up a Tetsubo or Kanabo. I don't know the real difference, so I use them interchangeably. Tetsubo or Kanabo, which is Kanabo. They were vicious fucking things. Like, real bad. The Oni in DBD uses one for his power. So, uh, I don't play DBD. I have self-respect, though. Uh, so, with this easy jumping point, I will then. A lot of this will probably be like fantasy stuff because, again, that's kind of my wheelhouse. That being said, the thing I'm planning is not fantasy, so who knows? Maybe it'll go up somewhere. Probably not AO3. I want to make a name for myself, I guess. I don't fucking know. I feel like a dick when I say that, like a self-important dick, but no, I want this to work. Why do I make myself feel bad for wanting better? Whatever. Stop putting yourself down. Punch yourself in the chin, you didn't see. So I'm going to use that jumping off point with the Tetsubo Kanabo talk to bring up my beloved blunt weaponry. I know I left behind the idea of like the arming your army in a fantasy setting, but I will jump back. Maybe, I promise. I promise that maybe I will. Yeah, so it's the most wishy-washy. Let me just get up and stretch for a second. Ooh, there we are. Crack my back, something nice. There goes the rest of it. Yep, nice. You might want to do the same. Check your posture, please, and fix it if it's bad, as I am doing right now. Now, there we go. That feels better. Now, blunt weapons are my favorite kind of weapon. I have long said to my friends that the first weapon of war was the club. Knives were tools first and foremost, as was the axe. The spear was the tool of the hunter. The mace, the club, the bludgeon, that was the tool of the soldier. When you wanted to kill a motherfucker, like a dude, like a guy, you'd bludgeon him with a club. Because that doesn't really work super well on animals, right? We were made to throw shit first and foremost. Sure, we batted at things with thick, heavy, blunt weaponry, but shaping a branch into a club, a surface that is designed to inflict as much trauma in one swing as you can, that was made to kill a person. There's no two ways about this. Clubs were here to kill people. So, There's a weird reverence I have for clubs, and I know it's weird because I shouldn't think like that because like it's just an inanimate object, but I think it represents a big part of our history, specifically clubs. They still are used to this day, police batons. They're not meant to kill, but it happens. Not that I'm justifying it, but and the ways we've used them are different. Police are supposed to be taught to aim for the quadriceps and biceps, and to avoid hitting the head, and then I think hitting the triaps, I think too, in order to cause specifically pain so they stop resisting. It is literally meant to hurt you, but without leaving any lasting damage, so you just give up. Because hitting someone in the head either kills them or, makes them ignore the pain to try to hurt you more and shit like that. But look into how nightsticks were used throughout the history. Did you know there was also a day stick? And the nightstick was for specifically the night, where they believed police officers needed more defense, protection, i.e., rather. New York City history. And then from there on, nightstick spread. So there's this weird reverence I have for the club, it being the first weapon of war, uh, that exists all the way up to today. Consider that every single historical group or tribe or civilization of history had their own version of a club, right? There was even a Senate staff that they used in early American Senate to just beat the shit out of each other for being fucking retarded, which was hilarious. Yeah, like you could just in Senate grab the staff and beat the shit out of your member of the house or whatever. They just let that happen for a while. I think it's stained with blood currently, is how much it happened. Which is fucking badass. Um, we shouldn't continue doing it, but hey, that's sick as fuck, no? Every single human tribe and early city, town, whatever, what have you, cottage, hamlet, they all had a type of club. They may differ, but they also have a lot of similarities because, again, they are just clubs. So, already mentioned, and this is not like, an early thing, 'cause they were had iron working for them, but I already mentioned the Japanese Tetsubo Kanabo. There, um, there were varying kinds of clubs for the Maori tribe. Now, despite being clubs, despite being of a wooden construction, many tribes would sharpen the edge of them so that when you use it with force, they also rend the skin, a bleeding slicing weapon, though they are also, flat end clubs. And even the striking face is still pretty blunt, so it is still a club. It just also happens to be thin enough to tear and cut skin, is like think of it like a short sword or an arming sword. I know the Maori tribe had a few different versions of this. Um, Maori tribes of New Zealand and I think Australia. I don't know how true that is. I don't know your history. I apologize. I say lying to your face. Fuck you, Australia. There's no reason. Just, I don't know. Fuck you guys. Huh? What have you done for me specifically? Do something for me specifically, then we can talk. All right. Um, and there, there's the whole like almost like myth of the gun stock club or the musket stock club for American native tribes. Look up like a musket stock club, right? It's very contested whether or not it was an attempt by Native Americans to imitate the actual look of a musket stock to be a sort of club. I personally am on the side of it was not an intentional on the Native Americans' part to design a weapon that looks like the stock of a club. I just think, convergent design. Because, sometimes you just make crazy shit and go, this fucking works. All right, time to use this shit. Right? So, I'm just looking it up just to double check. Yeah, the Gunstock War Club. I fully believe that it's coincidence that look that like that because with some of them, I think eventually they were decorated to be a sort of symbol. But with most of them, the looks comparing to a musket are kind of like not even that good, right? They're not even that close looking. They just happen to be a curve with a little hump, which of course they would. You're maximizing strike force. That's just what you end up doing. So I think it's coincidence that they end up looking like a musket stock, and I don't put stock into it being like a, because also it's co-opted by a bunch of racist groups to make their claims. But anyway, I think it's coincidence. But there are also different types of clubs, mostly using like um, almost like a ball in a socket to emphasize things. I know a bunch of African tribes eventually, when they were ended up being colonized, and then it was restricting what kind of weapons people could carry on them because a lot of weapon restrictions happen over the time throughout history, both for knives, blunts, guns, things like that. It was eventually developed into a sort of like walking cane because hey, it's not a club. You see the length of it because back then they were like, yeah, clubs are fucking dangerous. Let's restrict the people's ability to have them. So it became a walking cane, which leads to a lot of cane fighting techniques, which leads there is the Irish shillelagh, which if you play D&D, you'll know this weapon as the shillelagh spell, the cantrip, which is the best cantrip. I love using it all the time when I'm druid. In fact, thank you for having the warden feature for D&D 5.5 because a druid that is focused on melee in my head is sick as fuck. Shillelagh is spelled Sheleigh. They are made of blackthorn specifically, as that is in a bunch of folklore a wood type that is effective against ghosts, goblins, other sorts of creatures in the dark and the moor. Take some water. You cut the blackthorn in, I don't know, December. I think there's a whole process to it. You cut the blackthorn and have it dry for a year, I believe. Um, and it's a very thick, heavy walking cane that you would use, out on the moor, because Ireland is a big, swampy bog. Someone who's obsessed with wetlands just cringed at me saying the wrong thing, but I don't care right now. And the heads were shaped, the shafts were stylized, as is tradition for people's like accessories going out and about. And they come into all sorts of shapes and sizes, but they are all cut from blackthorn, all of a moderate length. The end is tapered and has a little metal cap. And eventually, uh, there's a whole fighting scene with the shillelagh because again, British restricting the usage of weapons, and you can look into it. Shillelagh, walking stick fighting techniques, things like that. I actually didn't repeat myself. That was me like telling you the things you can look up to find it. It was primarily still a walking cane meant to show a sense of class and wealth and like a sense of honor and pride, though it was also you're strolling down the street, some ruffian demands that you hand over your wallet, you raise your cane and break his fucking jaw, and then stroll away because I don't give a shit. This is because, again, the where you put your hand on the cane head, was instead a rounded ball, which fits nicely in the palm, but also nicely emphasizes striking force, which is why a bunch of clubs use this sort of idea. It's either the ball at the end of the cane, or oftentimes it was reinforced into a socket, and a lot of clubs and canes of history would have like stylized faces on the ends of it, which are very interesting to look into. All the intricate designs and carvings are actually very beautiful and handmade and very very beautiful, delicately made, and are kept to date. I actually think they are still like pretty well preserved in whatever take a sip of water, whatever museum they might have ended up in. They look damn good. Um, Very detailed. It's good. I can't emphasize enough how much like these weapons were a work of art. Um, Acid in the throat. And then there were other sorts of, clubs and other things. So the thing with clubs, right, is not all of them have any real names outside of tribe slash civilization that made them, vague description of what it looks like, right? So we have all sorts of things. I can't. Fuck me, I can't even describe them right now. There are also like oversized, large, two-handed ones. There's the Macahuatl, which I've professed my love for already, which combines the benefits of both a machete or short sword or what have you, alongside a club. Um, as there were usually double-edged, but not always, with napped obsidian blades, very put together very closely. Although you'll find in the art depicting them that they were spaced out. I think that that's just to emphasize that it was not one continuous long piece of obsidian, it was a set a bunch of pieces put together. Because there's also reportings of there being basically a seamless line, recordings in like the Conquistadors' journals of it being a seamless line, but serrated. And we ended up finding out that, oh yeah, they're just a bunch of pieces of obsidian put together. So I think it still has one solid line, but the drawings just emphasize that it was not. Um, and then the flat ends were also slightly gnarled, not gnarled, raised, whatever. They were sloped, whatever, concave, pointed, I guess is the way to put it. I can't describe the word right now because it's late at night and I'm stupid. But basically, it was designed to be a striking face that also has a lot of fucking stoppage power behind it. Again, you can use it as a blade, or you can shift it in your grip a little bit and use it like a club, because Macahualos were only given to a sect of warriors that had to prove their worth by hunting a jaguar, because it was a revered animal for its like outstanding hunting prowess. That was a very uh, big threat to humans, and there's a whole like culture behind it. But the ones wearing jaguar pelts would be the ones given macahuatls and shields because they were too valuable to let die. And it was a whole part of their thing that they would, bring back live sacrifices, etc., etc., etc. Which is why their weapon was a club primarily and a sword secondarily, but while still being the same weapon because, you got to keep your soldiers light on their feet, things like that. Again, could reportedly decapitate horses. Like, these things were fucking vicious. And they were strong construction too. So never like look at a club and be like, ah, primitive weapon. No, dude, these things were pretty sophisticated in terms of, yeah, I've made this really strong, designed to cave your brain in, and out of one piece of hardwood. And then even then, the ones that were made out of softwood, such as on the Caribbean islands, were also still pretty tough, but they also had their own sort of things about them, reinforced with like coconut fibers and shark teeth, and also, human hair to like be woven into small cordage because you got to use everything. Things like that. You can look into how the Caribbean, or I would say Samoan, but I don't know how true that is. Islands use, how their warfare went about. But like, dude, the shit we did with clubs, downright fucking vicious and nearly inhumane. And that's just before we started doing metalworking. When metalworking came out, this shit got worse. Um, bronze. That's not how you spell bronze. Okay. How do I? Nope. Roman club. How do I? So Romans had bronze fucking clubs because hey, why wouldn't we? From what I remember, I can never remember the name or how to find it anymore. Bronze flanged club, is that it? Hold on. History. No, no. Uh, flanged mace. Okay, so I'll just talk about a flanged mace for a while then. So, flanged mace, look it up. It's a kind of mace that is um disc mace. Fuck yeah. Hold on. I got to. All right. So, ignore my fucking evil laugh. You know how I was gushing about Clubs' ability to focus striking power onto one specific part of the surface to cave your fucking brain in? All right, I want you to look up a disc mace. Now, a disc mace is a flat circle, not always a flat circle, but it's a napped stone in the shape of a circle, put onto a branch, and then the top of the branch is widened so the disc can't slip off, and it's also put into a little channel so it can't slip off. And what you do with that is you raise it over your head and you crash it onto another motherfucker's skull, and it just acts like it doesn't exist for a solid inch or two. Because you're focusing your striking power onto that tiny little edge of the circle, and it just freaks the fuck out whatever bone it's going to hit into. And then because it's this circle, you don't even need to really be precise. You overhead, you can side swing, you can fucking really wind back with both hands if you want to and crash into that fucker's jaw and shatter it. And they were still strong. There are Egyptian ones, right? They were made also. I don't know what metal this is because I don't know metal at a glance. Um, but they, look almost like a bit like a funnel at the top. But it's just like me describing. If you look up disc mace, you'll see it. And then there was oh my god, this one was disgusting when I looked at it. So you can probably also see it if you look up disc mace. Now it's bronze. What you'll notice is it has like 6 different angles. It looks like a gear. 6 different like ends. So this one takes a bit more focus. But if you could imagine it, the end that hits is gonna really, really, really fuck up whatever bone it's gonna crash into. Armor does not help. Well, of course, armor helps, but the concussive force is still gonna break the bone it's like that's hiding beneath it. These things were fucked up. And because we're emphasizing striking power as much as we can, it means you don't have to go for these devastating, crushing, full force swings. And in fact, most of the time you wouldn't. You would restrain yourself. You would do even measured swings, letting you swing more with still really strong power, which means, yeah, they're just fucked. They literally just can't do anything about it. Disc maces were fucking horrifying when we developed metal. Because apparently the first disc maces didn't have metal. And when we figured that shit out, yeah, it was fucking over for them. They just could, they was just like, whoever got hit by that, bye. There's no getting up. If you get up, it's for like 5 minutes, and you're seizing and you're convulsing, and then you're gone. An awful 5 minutes to live. So, uh, and then we learned metalworking, and our disc maces persisted, but so did our flanged maces. So what a flanged mace is it takes the solid, like a metal head. It's a bit longer on this one. And then out come these shapes at the end of it. Usually end up being large spikes to do what the disc mace did, but on a more vertical level instead. So you don't have to even be that precise anymore. They were like the beaks of war picks or warhammers, and would just fucking crunch armor and bone, and you didn't want to get hit by them. The thing is, it's a lot harder to teach someone to use a mace. It's a bit more costly for resources, and it was just more practical to arm soldiers with spears and short swords. Um, so maces ended up just being a symbol of status. And they actually were for a good long while, the same way knives ended up being a symbol of status in Spain, and that's how we got Spanish knife fighting, the Navajo knife. So apologies for constant looking things up, but you're not here for accuracy. You're here for my autism. Navaja knife. Look those things up. Oh man, they're fucking pretty. I actually really want one, even though I'm Mexican. It feels like a fucking betrayal of my people. But hey, I got Spanish DNA in me. I know I do. So, not that I acknowledge that it exists, but I know it's there. These things were fucking huge, right? They were a utility knife. They were utility folding knife. The last thing you wanted to hear on a highway is what they would say. Usually a 12-inch blade. Disgusting things. They were a ratcheting knife. as in that's how they unfolded. They have a pretty sound. I'll get into knives later, I guess. Um, I've been on this club topic for too long. I actually genuinely do have more to say, but I will restrict myself for your sake because we're here to talk about more weapons. We've banned it for a while. Let's talk about a modern setting because people can write those. I don't think this is about fantasy at all. This is about weapons and stories. So people can write those. People can write modern settings. I know they can. What'll be the go-to weaponry? Well, first of all, knives, because everyone has a knife. All sorts of pocket knives and utility knives and just regular knives, K-bar knives, like what have you, bayonets. I don't know what the fuck. I'm not a knife guy, like at all, because knife guys piss me off. They're so smug. And also, guns. So I don't think gunfights are bad for your story. There have been talks every now and again in writing circles that say like I never add guns to my stories or I write settings in this time period in X time period because Lamau they got broken up with. Sorry, I just looked at someone's status. It said miss my wife. Did you get fucking broken up with Lamau? Uh, I am vindictive. What? I'm allowed to be happy about this. They said they might miss my session. So it's justified when you think about it. Uh, I see discourse in writing circles pretty often. It's like, oh, I never add guns to my setting because, or oh, I write in this time period because, or oh, I write fantasy because I don't have to add guns to my worlds because. Say it with me. Gunfights aren't fun to write. They're not interesting to write. They're not. They don't flow well to write, etc., etc., etc. Bitch made, bitch made, bitch made. Coward take. L take. Grow the fuck up. But if you're saying that because guns are a sort of end all be all, if you get shot, that's kind of it, I kind of do agree with you on that aspect. But only if you get hit by the bullet. I'll get into like my takes on guns now. Actually, I won't hold this off. I don't think gunfights break the pace of your story. I don't think gunfights poorly flow, and I don't think gunfights are uninteresting in stories. Everybody harps on melee fighting because they say it gives time for the characters to talk to each other. We all know the clash scene where they clash their swords together and like they go, they try to break each other's guard. Everyone goes like, "That's not how you sword fight at all." And even I do it. Uh, to clarify, even I go, "That's not how you sword fight at all." I don't write clashes in my stories. Shoutouts to the Clash achievement in DD2, where you go to the mountain with all negative relationships. Do you have to go to the mountain, or do you have to beat the boss with all negative relationships? I'll check later. Um, um, the Clash and stories where they go like, oh yeah, sword fights are more drawn out than a gunfight. It gives my characters a lot more time to talk. Talk to the antagonist, things like that. I can see that, but don't see how you think gunfights don't allow that. It could allow it, well and true, right? Well and true, right? If they're behind cover and shouting at each other, right? Occasionally taking pot shots or like uh, deciding whether or not a good time to run is now, things like that. I'm going to slow down my talk because I actually do want to get this point across. So consider the following. Instead of taking a more vocal, dialogue heavy way of describing how your antagonists or main characters function, we could do a lot more physicality to do the heavy lifting. Because we're probably going to be in your main character's like view, you could break down what they're thinking as this is going on, like the panic they may be feeling, or the righteous fury that could be boiling beneath their veins, or things of that nature. So consider if they have to take a more tactically oriented mind view. You could have in the back of their head they're constantly stressing about just how much ammo they have left. If it's something like a revolver, they could be fretting the lengthy reload they'll have to make. If it's black powder, doubly so. If it's a rifle, maybe not so much. If it's a modern rifle, like magazine fed. If it's an older manual sort of gun, absolutely. Lever action, they're fucking praying they're not going to get caught on the reload. And in fact, you could have your main character have a reloading habit like that, where they drop the lever, put in 2 shells or cartridges, and then cycle the action, and then hold themselves tight up against the barrier and listen very closely. If they hear any advancing footsteps, they'll take like a pot shot and try to they'll first fire over the barrier and like look over to just to check, and then cycle the action, letting the spent shell get dropped, and then tossing in 2 more, closing it, doing that over and over again to show like your main character is aware of their flaws and is working around them, giving us a little bit of insight into how they function. Or, they could be conversely, brash, sort of like not caring, uh, not nonchalant, but like more willing to get in there, break the enemy's lines with what limited ammo they have, and then once they're there, I don't know, grab like the knife at their hip or pistol at their hip or something. Or even if they do have a quick, snappy reload, they're constantly counting the bullets in their head, going, okay, how many more do I have? And maybe even they'll fake a reload, maybe like fake a gap, like, okay, I fired 25 bullets, they probably haven't been counting mine. I'll take a break, act like I'm reloading, and then when they pop up, I'll use my remaining 5 to see if I can like nail the fucker. Right, something like that. Or they could be counting their enemy shots, but you could have a scene where they're counting the shots and then realize, wait a minute, that's more than 20 or 30 or whatever the magazine size is. Fuck, what gun are they actually using? Do they have more? Are they firing between 2 weapons, making me confused, making all this counting I've been doing pointless? Things like that, right? You could have them be like crouching, one arm bracing against the wall, waiting for a break in the gunfire to go dart between cover, and then maybe have like a paranoid character thrust their hand out and pull it back for a second, and then the firing starts again, proving they were right to go and test it beforehand, that they were being lulled into a false sense of security. Or even worse, they weren't. They saw the hand, and now they have to wait again as they just finished reloading, and they know that, fuck, if I ran, I would have made it. Now I'm stuck pinned again. Something like that. You see what I'm trying to say here? Like, the fight can be more dynamic if you just throw in cover. If you work with your environment. If you have your character think their actions through because of the risk prevalent, because with the risks being higher, they have to be. You see what I'm like trying to emphasize here? I'm gonna go quickly use the bathroom and come back. I think most of the issues with these, I'm back by the way. I washed my hands and everything, whatever. I think most of the issues with these settings are like gun-related issues. Takes my final sip of this bottle of water. Most of the issues with most of the hang-ups or issues that you have with these firearm like duels could be solved by just changing the kind of gun or like changing the kind of gun used in your settings, whatever, I guess. Um, First of all, I think modern rifles are fucking lame. I understand their power and I understand like the craftsmanship that goes into it, that they can be cool. Manual weapons are so much cooler. Lever action, bolt action, revolver, and break action. Le- Revolving, lever, bolt, and break action are just, you know, there's something so. I'm making the hand motions. There's just something so, you know? What I mean is like the limited fire rate, the smaller magazine capacity, clip size, both, I guess. Well, I guess no, and magazine and chamber, revolver chamber, and then breeches. Okay, would it be? Yeah, it is specific. It's magazine size because the clip feeds the magazine. There we go. I know if you're like freaking out about guns. I was thinking about like a Mauser broom handle. I was like, okay, that would be clip, right? Well, technically, yeah, but also no magazine. There is also not the point right now. I think a lot of the issues you guys have with this would be solved if you just have manual weapons, manual encompassing revolver, break, lever, bolt, because it solves either like capacity issues, so like they have to actually think about where they're shooting, things like that. It solves fire rate and a few of the other issues I had brought up. People like bring up if you just like because these sort of guns make you slow down, which just works for the stories, I guess. Although I don't think semi and full auto can't work. I don't know. I just think they're lame. I think the tactile feel of these guns and emphasizing that in the stories is a lot better. Um, Most people use muskets as like their like. I'm drawing the line here. I have it be levers actually as the draw the line here because I just think they're so good. I seldom throw a bolt action in, but when I do throw a bolt action in, it'll be like a prestige thing, right? Like, okay, yeah, like I am respected in this household. Here is the proof. Drops my Mosin Nagant on the table. Dad, it's 3012. Yep, and this is a real one, made by used by your great, 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 great grandpa. All right, you will respect this piece of steel and wood. Dad, it's rusting. Where? And as like frantically grabs like the gun oil and cleaning solvents. Um, but I think that if you're having issues with putting guns in your world, like because you're thinking of like rifles, just try putting it in a Winchester 1887 instead. It's a shotgun, first of all, I want to clarify that right now, but it's lever action. Um, in my setting that I'm doing, I'm not going to have any semi or automatic weapons. I'm just not going to explain why, they're just not going to be there. Um, Wait, no, that's not true. There will be. They're just incredibly very sparse. I was thinking of like a looty, like a handmade slash craft produced slash home brewed semi-automatic open bolt submachine gun, Samuel A. Ludi. I would recommend not looking that one up actually, unless you want to be on the ATF's list. So if you don't have a dog, go ahead. Get a fake dog, fill it with tannerite. That solves the issue. If you have no idea what I'm on about, it sounds schizophrenic. But and then also the consider bulletproof vest, things like that. Again, concussive force. Look into it, how it functions. It breaks your ribs but saves your life. Preferable. Gives you concussion but saves your life. Preferable. And then maybe I won't cover like traps and stuff. Fuck, that's a bit upsetting. We'll dart back over to arming your army. So I mentioned before, like, yeah, what you're most likely going to arm your troops with is a spear and a short sword. It is specifically two weapons. The spear is there as the primary weapon, and then if someone gets too close, or like your spear, you lose it, or it breaks, or you dropped it by accident, you have your little arming sword right there at your hip that you are moderately trained with, only insofar as you're good enough, right? Keep in mind that they are their spear first. That's what we're using. That's what we're here for. The sword is supplementary. The same is true for knights, I believe. Keep that in mind. And also, they had their serfs or their squires carrying their ship for them, and a few other things like that. Then there's siege weapons, which I am nowhere near qualified enough to talk about because I never write siege weapons. But those take a lot of time to set up ahead of time, have to be either constructed on site or are vulnerable while being moved, and are only there to break down the castle walls, really, or to just like. Most of the time, they're just a threat. They're just a big threat, and the city goes, all right, all right, all right, all right, all right. I see what you're doing. I hear what you're doing. I'll capitulate. We'll talk. We'll sort this shit out. Just fucking hold off. Yeah, 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 yeah. Things like that. And for sci-fi, dude, I don't know. I don't write sci-fi. Uh, just remember, kinetic chads stay winning. Las cells cope and seethe. Energy weapons are cringe. I will only give rare exceptions for railguns, and even then, I'm not the biggest fan. Because I'm like, man, all the energy that goes into activating those magnetic coils, presumably, um, for large scale, whatever. Energy weapons are lame. If you under scrutiny, they fall apart. Kinetics will be eternal. Um, Given that I'm scrambled my brain and want to talk about other things more, as in like give them their due diligence again, because I know this has been all over the place, I will elect to end it here. I hope this has been moderately helpful. I don't really know how. I reiterate this point though. Make the legendary holy artifacts a weapon, a Makuhuatl. Do not have it be a sword, because there's something so commanding about the presence of a Makuhuatl. I think that's all I'll have to say. Sorry for the whatever. Catch you later, freaks.